Hello, Bill, and welcome to Story of a Storyteller. It's nice to have you on.
Thank you, Connor. Very nice to meet you, and I really appreciate you having me.
Not at all. When I first came across your book and your kind of story, I kind of said to myself, I have to get this guy on.
Good.
um, so I'd like to now talk to you about where you were and what you were doing and what happened to you on the 2nd of July, 1991.
Okay. Yeah, I was with my boss, and we had flown down to Atlanta for a couple days to meet with a client at a big bank down there. So we were going to fly home for 4th of July holiday here in St. Louis, and we, my boss and I and this client, he said he would walk us over to the subway in downtown Atlanta, and that would be the quickest way to the airport. So we were walking down the street, close to the subway. I think CNN Towers is actually there, but and I heard kind of back over my left shoulder, I heard pop, 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 and being July the 2nd, I thought, boy, that sure sounds like firecrackers, and I turned my head.
Yeah.
And as I turned my head, I just felt, wham, and my eyesight, it just exploded in my head, and I couldn't see anything. There was a lot of pain in particularly my eyes, and I fell down to the pavement on my hands and knees, and I guess I remember thinking after a few minutes that I didn't know what had happened to me. I kind of consciously, thoughtfully rolled over onto my back. I somehow decided that would have been a better position for me to be in, no matter what had happened to me. So, and there I lay. Couple minutes, it seemed pretty promptly, actually. An EMT guy showed up, and emergency medical tech, and came up to me and asked me how I was doing, and started calling me chief, which I'll never forget. And he checked me out, and checked out apparently the other two folks that were with me. So it turns out it was a gunshot. Obviously, I was shot in the head, and the two folks that were with me were both shot, and they were killed.
First of all, it's a traumatizing and horrifying event, obviously. But the fact that you can say, but I'm the lucky one. The fact that you survived and your boss and that client didn't, do you think that helped you to be positive about what happened, or are you just someone that's really positive and determined anyway?
I was in the hospital for about 3 weeks, and I'd say the first 2 weeks of that, I was in various stages of pretty highly medicated. But the last week or so in the hospital, I was really not so medicated. I think that allowed me to come to grips with it. I don't know at that point in time if I really thought I was, lucky as I clearly do today. But I did know that I was the same person. I knew I was all there. I knew I was. My brain worked the way it always had. I thought the way I always had. I didn't feel sorry for myself in particular. I didn't really recognize my limitations as I was laying in a hospital bed and everybody waiting on me. But I was aware, though, that I was there, and I did know what had happened to the other two folks. And I guess it gave me some strength to carry on where they couldn't. So quite a few things I'm grateful for. Number one is that it wasn't a real traumatic event. I wasn't in fear. I didn't know what was happening. Nobody approached us on the street and,
Sudden.
waved a gun or, acted like they were going to beat us up or anything. So I don't really, doesn't seem to me as a traumatic event that I'm suffering from PTSD. And maybe just because they weren't part of the event
Yeah.
for me.
I suppose because like it was so sudden, and also,
Yeah.
I mean, you didn't know what was going on until all of a sudden you had a serious amount of pain and everything, and
Yeah.
You were probably unaware of what had happened to the other two until the EMT had come.
Yeah, exactly. And none of us really, the fellow that did it, we didn't know him, he didn't know us. It was, in fact, totally random. So none of us and none of any of our decisions had any impact on this other than just the happenstance of all the decisions we all make every day to leave at this time or go to this place.
What were the things that really struck you as, oh, I really didn't think this would be this activity or skill or thing I do every day would be as affected?
The one thing that struck me just immediately was that I couldn't make notes. It was accessing and storing information, basically.
Oh, okay.
I could not even write a phone number down to refer to it if I was supposed to call, whoever. And that just was an immediate frustration because I was trying to call people to do some research to figure out who to talk to, learn this or that or, whatever. Even phone numbers maybe that I'd stored, on a piece of paper back then, I couldn't access. So that was a big thing. And I describe in the book just trying to walk up my block, without a cane, without any skills, and just banging into parked cars and, truck mirrors that were hanging out right about head height, and finding things in the kitchen. All the cardboard boxes seem the same, whether they're crackers or cereal or uncooked rice or whatever. The cans don't differentiate themselves either, so I couldn't tell the green beans from the pork and beans. Recreationally, I used to enjoy reading Sports Illustrated in particular, but newspapers and things like that. So that was a huge frustration.
What was something that you adapted to successfully or quickly then in that case?
Well, my dad and I, given the world of technology in 1991, we kicked it around, and what we ended up doing was going out and buying me a handheld dictation device, with a little micro cassette in it, and that worked great. I remembered actually, I had skied a very little bit, and I remembered it must have been a trip in about '84, seeing a blind skier in Aspen, Colorado, and at some point, everybody's wringing their hands about poor Bill. And I told my sister back, all the way back in the hospital that, I think somehow things are going to be okay, and maybe I'll just go skiing this winter. And I think they all looked at me like I was, nuts. And but so that was kind of on the horizon pretty early on, and ultimately I did end up tracking down a group in Aspen who was organized to provide what's called guides for blind skiers. It's a thing. I didn't invent it, so.
You should just say you did.
Well,
and how does that work? Does the guide ski? I have seen it because I was looking at your website, and there's a very interesting video there, and everyone should check it out after this episode. But could you explain how it actually works?
Yeah. So I am totally blind, and some blind skiers are not totally blind, and they would follow a guide more. A guide would wear very dark clothing and maybe yelp or make a noise every time they made a left or right turn, and the blind skier could follow. Being a total, I'm not comfortable in following sound that well, and so a guide skis behind me. And when we're skiing, he is essentially, or she is essentially saying, left, right, hold your next left, 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 right, left, right. And, it's somewhat more intricate than that, but not terribly so. I mean, that's the idea. And as we kind of get down to a lift area, they'll say, right turn to a stop, and we'll navigate through the lift line. Often the guide will kind of grab underneath my pole, and we'll be side by side, and he'll steer me just like a stick shift on a car, so to speak.
Oh yeah.
Just by grabbing my pole. So there's some techniques and
It's amazing.
Yeah, and it really works quite well. So
I
love it,
That's what I was going to say, because I can see in your face, like, you're lighting up talking about it and the directions. And that's the thing. I mean, so then, of course, now this is like, I mean, it's not enough for you to go and to continue to work and to ski 7 months after losing your sight, but then you went and you wrote a book as well on top of all that many years later. So what, I mean, I'm asking the same question twice, if you'd let me. One, yes. Also, what was the biggest challenge of writing Snowblind just as a person? And then what was the biggest challenge of writing the book then as a person that was blind, if you know what I mean?
I had been, I have heard for 30 years that I needed to write a book, whether they were co-workers that someone who had kind of lived through along with me what happened, and others were, clients and client people, and just anyway, people are always curious, and I'd say always very polite, but curious to know what happened. And so as I would tell the story, I would always be told I needed to write a book. The biggest question was just having the time. Once I went back to work, it was a fairly demanding job. One thing about being blind, I'd say I learned that surprised me was that I can do darn near anything, but many of the things that I needed to do take longer than they did when I was sighted or for a sighted person. So I didn't really have the time, and therefore actually writing a book really didn't come onto the radar. But after I was retired, which is probably 10 years ago, I started fiddling around and, writing kind of the first chapter, so to speak, of the book, just what happened on, July 2nd. It was fairly easy, but I sent it to a friend of mine who was a writer, and or an editor, really. And his reaction was, well, that's kind of a nice start, but it's not a book at all. So the thought was there. I ended up a few years later meeting a woman in St. Louis who has a business. She's an editor, publisher, and it's at thebookprofessor.com. Her name's Nancy Erickson, and she ended up encouraging me quite a bit. And from her professional world, she ended up being the editor and publisher of this book, but along the way, she encouraged me quite a bit, taught me quite a bit about, the structure of a book and the structure of a paragraph and some of the thought processes. To answer your second question first, some of it was very difficult. I had really never told the story. I'd never thought through a lot of the stuff. I thought back through as I was writing this, and doing some research. I tried to, I've talked to EMT people. I've talked to a lot of different people. so some of it was hard. So whether through just, lack of discipline or through the difficulty of revisiting some of the things emotionally, I put it down for a year at a time, several times, and then I'd get back to it and I'd be surprised at maybe how much I had or where I'd stopped, and pick it up. I found that I would write when I was inspired. I would write. I could write, chapters, tens of pages, just blah blah blah. When I was in the mood or inspired, I could write a lot.
So same as us all then. All us writers were all like that.
Writer's block, I guess, is what that is, huh? Yeah. So.
And so then when you finally then had the book done and had, I'm sure it went through many drafts and there was a lot of editing process and everything, but when you finally became published earlier this year, like 2 months ago now, I think it is, what was that like? Like how did you feel on publication day? Like it's a big achievement to write a book at all, but especially to write a book that's a memoir about a traumatic event, and especially as someone with a disability, that means is impeded a little bit to write it. Like, what was that moment like then?
It was really a feeling of accomplishment. I was very happy with the way that the book came out. I've been really thrilled with the reaction to it. With whether from a lot of friends who have, some of who I knew before and some of who I've met in the last 15 or 20 years. But I guess I've just been really pleased with the reaction to it all. First of all, it's a feeling of accomplishment, and I'm glad it's over. I'm glad it's done. I'm glad it's done, whether it's just for my family to have a record of it, for my kids to find out more, and for other people that are in my life. But I'm also glad that I do think it tells a story of we all have challenges in our lives. I had challenges, I thought, before this happened to me. A lot of them may not measure up. This is very dramatic to get shot, but I think the book describes kind of my approach to accepting what had happened to me, having the hope to go on, the courage to not to buckle, not to give into it, and not to just fold up and go move in with my parents or do whatever, but to continue to get out and try to live life to the fullest. It talks about going to rehab and following directions, learning what I needed to do, having the skills that I needed, and then coming out and being brave enough and courageous enough to jump out in front of potential clients or new clients, and this professional world that I dealt in, that I honestly don't remember ever running into somebody professionally who was blind. I since have met quite a number of people, many lawyers and professionals of other sorts who are blind. So I didn't do something that's completely unique, but I did something that I didn't really know. I didn't have a path for. I just figured I would get to the destination, and I just kept plugging away and doing what I needed to do between here and there. So, and I guess just to finish that thought, I'm happy I've got it all written down for that reason, that if others can read it and gain from it, the hope and the desire to try and the courage to get out and do it that I had, I'd be thrilled. That would make me very happy.
I cannot imagine anyone who wouldn't come across your story and your book and not be inspired and not feel like, well, if this man can get over that hurdle, I can
Yeah.
get over this hurdle, you know.
Yeah.
And it's a testament to your determination and perseverance and
Well, thank you.
grit. I don't know, maybe stubbornness, maybe some people will call it either.
Yeah, I don't think we don't want to go too deeply into my psychological makeup, I'm sure. But, yeah.
Well, it would need to be a
Uh,
longer podcast if I went into the psychological makeup of people who write.
yeah. But no,
Um,
just to finish that thought, I've had a number of friends of mine have bought multiple copies of the book and given them and tell me they've given them to their grown kids, and their point is to tell their kids to give up the pity party and get on with your life, and that's flattering, very flattering to me. That
there'll be links and everything like that for anybody who is listening or watching, in the description, in the show notes, to find Bill's book and everything like that. If you're interested in buying it and checking out the full story, because I mean, we condensed the whole thing into like 45, 50 minutes. There's a whole book about it, folks. So Bill, thank you so much for coming on to the show. It's been great to meet you and to get to know you. So thanks very much.
Well, thank you, Connor. I really appreciate the opportunity to come on, and I would also encourage anybody that has listened to all this to get the book, and
yeah, of course.
hopefully people can be inspired.
Thanks again.